Hey, welcome to another episode of Jack Theology. Glad to be here.
Yeah, here we are again. Good to
Welcome.
see you, Matt.
Yeah, yeah. Good to be here. How's life?
Life is crazy as always. Um, we have Mother's Day coming up this weekend, and so whenever you've got four kids and you've got a mother, and it's just it gets complicated. I thought that the older that my kids got, they would be more inclined to take care of holidays like Mother's Day themselves, and I'm learning that it just doesn't necessarily work that way. At least not in my household. So,
No. I
yeah.
now make my kids pay for their mother's
Ooh,
gifts, though. They have to chip in.
there you go. I used to
She's your mother.
we used to take them to Five Below and be like, everybody pick out something for mom, and then we'll give it to her. But then,
Yeah.
the older that they got, it just every year I think we do something different, but we've not really hit on it yet. As a pastor, I used to be like, it's wrong for a guy to speak on Mother's Day, so I'd ask my wife to speak on Mother's Day. And at some point, Sally was like, "This isn't making my Mother's Day wonderful to have to preach on Mother's Day."
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. It's a classic Sunday that in patriarchal churches, you would let a woman speak from the pulpit.
Yeah.
But yeah. Um,
How are things
Yeah,
with
I
you?
enjoyed some tacos on Cinco de Mayo the other
Yeah.
day. Uh, that was fun, and yeah, looking forward to Mother's Day as well. See what my wife wants to do, um, and she likes to play card games, so I'm sure at some point we'll be playing card games as a family. And
It's her day, right?
yeah, it's her day.
My wife
Just
says
can't.
there are 364 Father's Days. This is my day. She said.
Try. My whole goal is to not screw it up, and inevitably I'll screw something up. But
you know,
that's
it's
what
not it's
that's
not
what
your
guys
fault,
do.
right? It's not your mom.
That's
It's
true.
it's still your
Very,
fault,
very good
though,
point.
right?
Very good point. Yeah.
I have learned over the
uh,
years that it's always my fault, even if it's not my fault. It's just Kevin. Let it be. Let it be your fault. And I don't think that's a male female. I just think in relationships, it's often that way. Sometimes it's just swallow and shut up, Kevin. Just
it's
swallow and
just, yeah,
shut
it's
up.
just better. It's
In
always
church
better. Not the
ministry,
tip.
just keep your mouth closed, Kevin. With the neighbors, whatever they're griping, just keep your mouth closed, Kevin. City council meetings, marriage arguments, you know, baseball fields. Just keep, well, maybe not the sports fields,
I
but
don't know
every
the
other key.
umpires. Yeah, sometimes those umpires need to let we need to let them know what's
Oh,
up.
I know you don't keep your mouth closed on the fields. I know how you are. You're an
Yeah,
eight.
I ended up becoming a ref because a ref challenged me. Why don't you become a ref? And so I did it, and
I love it.
I actually enjoyed it because I didn't. I had that rare ability. I just didn't care if coaches were yelling at me. Um, it was kind of fun. I enjoyed it, and yeah, you make bad calls, and you just when you tell a
You just
coach,
pretend you didn't.
no, when you tell a coach that, yeah, you were right on that one. My bad. It's like what can they say? What can they say? They can't say anything.
Yeah, a few weeks ago we were doing baseball, and it was like a third out on first base. Kid caught on first base, but his foot wasn't all the way on the bag when he caught it. But and the ump actually called a safe, but everybody on the team thought it was out, so everybody just cleared the field because it would have been the third out. And so everyone's
Uh,
like looking at the umps like it wasn't out, and the ump's like, whatever. I'm like, come on, like do your job. Like you even made it. Come on,
yeah,
you're gonna let a team of little third graders push you around like that? Come on.
yeah, you can't. That's the number one rule of reffing is you have to be confident, even if you know you messed it up.
Yeah,
Just be super confident you're right because you cause more problems by hesitating.
yeah.
Yeah, but um, speaking of sports, um, well, sports are a good analogy for where we're headed. But we want to talk about where we're headed today. We want to spend a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks over the next few weeks to discuss kind of the ancient practices we've talked a lot about here when we deconstruct, when we break things down of our faith or at church, like how do we reconstruct it? And it kind of falls right in line with your book that's coming out in a month or two. And so we wanted to talk about that. And specifically today, we want to talk about kind of this idea of how did the ancients structure their lives? The early church structured their lives. It was highly structured, to be honest with you. And what are some of those faith practices that are still happening today that we can apply in a structured way to our lives? A Christian word we use is liturgy. And I remember as a kid, I was thinking about baseball. I played baseball as a kid. I remember um, my coach would give us a liturgy to get better, right? He just didn't say, go home and get better. Like some pastors say, go home and be more spiritual, right? Go be more like Christ. Like, like what do I
What
do?
I do,
And
right?
so yeah,
Read
so
your
the
Bible
coach would
more
give
and
me
come
like,
to church. It's like that was the extent of it.
yeah, yeah, that was it.
Pray more, read the Bible
Uh,
more, go to church more.
yeah, pray, read the Bible, and yeah, give
Which
more money
none of those
to
things are bad,
the
but like,
yeah.
is
Um, but I think we intuit that. I think the sports connection is big because a lot of folks intuit sports or even music, fill in the blank, um, that there needs to be a structure to this. There needs to be some practices that we do. And then as a result of those practices, I will get better at this thing. And I think our spiritual life can be similar. And James K. Smith is popular about this whole idea that when we form liturgies in our lives, even if we're not like real excited about them at first, these liturgies actually transform our hearts and make us become something. And there's all sorts of liturgies in our culture around us that are trying to form our hearts. And so why not create structures and liturgies in our own life for spirituality so that we become more like Christ, love Christ more, fill in the blanks. So
yeah, and I
yeah.
think this makes sense to a lot of people whenever we think about it. You're right, using sports or other analogies are great. If you don't ever practice baseball, throwing, catching, hitting outside of being on the field playing, you're probably not going to progress as quickly as anybody else is, and you're going to be behind. My son, 7th grade in band, plays tuba. He has dreams of being in marching band in high school. We have a phenomenal marching band down here, nationally recognized. Um, they play the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade every 4 years. He wants to, maybe be in a college marching band, but he doesn't ever practice at home at all. So I'm like, you have all these dreams, you have all these goals of being proficient in your ability, the thing that you want to give yourself to, but you're not really doing any rhythms, any routines, anything that's strengthening your skill set. And I think that's a real easy for most of us port over into the spiritual world. Is it a requirement that you do a lot of these things? I don't think so. But if you want to become proficient, if you want to experience full life, if he wants to experience fully what baseball can be, my 8-year-old, if my 13-year-old wants to fully experience what a great band sounds like and be a part of that, I got to put in the time and put in the work. And I think that ports over to the spiritual realm as well. If you want to experience everything that it means to be human and to be a follower of Jesus Christ, we do things, we put rhythms into our life, routines into our life that enable us to accomplish that. We all live by rhythms and routines, right? All of us have rhythms and routines that enable us to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. So what are we doing for our spiritual health?
Yeah. And to highlight the power of this, it's powerful when we create structures and liturgies and rhythms. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell talked about, the 10,000 hour thing. You become an expert at anything if you spend 10,000 hours doing it. And he breaks it down like, well, if you want to spend 10,000 hours doing it, you're not going to do that all at once. You're going to have to create little pockets each and every day or be consistent. And then eventually you'll get there. Um, James K. Smith, I love how he talks about it. I mean, his popular level book that he wrote, "You Are What You Love." He talks about this idea how liturgies are all around us. And I know this for a fact because I was friends with a marketing executive, and he told me that, yeah, I asked him about this, and he's like, yeah, we spend billions of dollars in marketing to get you to create liturgies for you to get you to fall in love and buy our products. And he's like, we do so much research on what you're going to do and how you're going to walk into a store, how you're going to look at your phone. We want to create new habits, continue old habits so that you continue to buy our products. And it's amazing how stores are designed, how, I think Disney World or Disney stores, if you remember in malls, they wanted you to go right or something. Maybe it was left. I forget, but they designed their store to force you to look at all their products that they wanted you to look at, and they knew that you would do it, and they knew, and through research they can figure out where to place products, what you might like. It's fascinating to hear. And so our business culture, people make money, billions of dollars of money based on liturgical setups, and your influence. We are all influenced by it every day. Um, and I used to actually catch myself. There's times where I feel like a draw to something, right? Like, why am I on this website looking about buying this product? Like, I got sucked in to this liturgy. They created a liturgy, and I reverse engineered in my mind what they did, and it worked. And so how do we do that for the church? And I think there's some practices we could talk about. Um, and so there's two big ones that we could dive into. I think the one is kind of the daily office. There's the daily rhythm, and then there's the kind of big picture, the 365-day rhythm of the calendar. And I think if we talk about those two things, I think we could kind of fill in some of the other little things that are connected to those. So, did you want to give an overview of those two things?
Yeah, daily office goes by several different names. Liturgy of the hours. It is essentially various ways in order to say a habit, a routine of prayer, where you set aside specific times every day to pray. If you've ever been in a monastery situation, they do these things. They set aside certain times of hour, days of night to pray. The hours are actually strategically structured and common throughout most places, and have been for centuries, for almost 2,000 years. Monasteries and places have been doing these things. Maybe the best example for Christianity is actually the Islam community, who stops and prays at certain hours and at certain times, no matter where you are or what you're doing. There's a routine and a rhythm there. This goes back not just to the beginnings of Christianity, this goes back to the beginnings of Judaism. We see Daniel praying 3 times a day. And it was so regulated in his prayer times that, they were able to catch him do it. Because he did it at the same time every day. Well, Daniel wasn't an anomaly. Daniel was normal among the Israelite community. David, all of his many of his songs talk about praying at the gates of the morning, at the gates of the evening, which is sunrise and sunset. Praise, morning, noon, and night. Talks about rising in the middle of the night to pray. There are dozens and dozens of places in Psalms that speak about this. If you read closely in the book of Acts, it talks a lot about going to the temple at the hour of prayer, is the way it actually kind of frames it multiple times. The disciples, Peter, James, John, go there at the time of prayer and pray. Whenever Paul is praying in the middle of the night and worshiping in the middle of the night, and he's chained, and the earthquake happens and the jailer thinks they've run away. Well, that wasn't random. Paul is praying one of those hours of prayer. And so, you see this routine in Judaism, and it ports over into Christianity. And I think that whenever Paul writes that line, I forget where it is in the New Testament, he writes this line about pray without ceasing. He's really not talking specifically about literally just praying all the time, which is the way I heard it, kind of spoken about whenever I grew up in evangelical churches. So it's not a bad idea. What he's talking about praying without ceasing is praying without ceasing on those hours. And the interesting thing is with time zones, this idea is kind of cool, that there is, if you're praying on certain hours and everybody's praying on those hours, then, through the rotation of time zones, there's those hours are hitting at all times, everywhere. And so, we accomplish a world that is praying without ceasing.
Yeah. Yeah, and the early church did it as well. We talk. They say they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and the prayers.
Yeah.
Right.
The prayers,
It's implied there.
not prayer,
Yeah, the
but
prayers.
the prayers.
Yeah, the regular rhythms of prayer, and we actually can find through extra biblical resources that they had rhythms of early in the morning, mid morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and then kind of in the night. And so there is this rhythm of hours of prayer. And so I think I actually was talking to a Muslim friend of mine the other day. We were talking about the connections that Christianity and Islam have together, that some similarities. And they had said the actual daily office. I mean, he's a guy who's well studied. He had gotten an MA at a seminary, at a biblical seminary, as is Islamic
Oh, wow.
man. Yeah, and so he understood the daily office, our history. He said, Islam took that from Christians, and we've just done it better.
And continue to do
you
it.
know?
Christianity kind of left it behind. And
Yeah,
I hate to say it, but it kind of shows.
yeah,
I mean, whenever you look at
yeah,
Islam, and this is obviously kind of outside perception, but whenever you look at the Muslim community, I see practicing Muslims, and they seem far more dedicated to their faith. They seem far more invested in their faith. They seem deeper and more mature in their faith than most of the Christians that I interact with every day. And I truly believe that it's this structure, it's these rhythms, specifically prayer, the other things I think that they do as well, but specifically this that has grounded them into their faith in a way that Christianity, that doesn't practice rhythmic or structured prayer, just doesn't have, I think, to our detriment.
yeah. I think so. For me, if I were to advising somebody on a first liturgical step personally, it'd be to create some rhythms around prayer in the daily office. It's where I started personally. I actually took my phone, I put in the hours that I felt I could accomplish. I think, like any good practice, I mean, I'm sure you teach this when you're teaching someone to diet, you know, pick some easy wins in the beginning so you
Yeah.
can continue the momentum.
Yeah, they're
And
what, 8
so
offices or something
I
like
think
that. I don't
similarly,
suggest starting with 8.
yeah,
Now you're welcome to do that,
exactly.
but maybe pick 1 or 2 or 3 at the most that kind of fit into your schedule. Which you're welcome to go research daily office or liturgy of the hours and find the traditional times and choose a few of those, but also choose ones that work and fit for you. Put a reminder in your phone every day that pops up a little message that says time to pray, and spend a couple of minutes wherever you are doing it. I think it's a great idea, Matt. And as
Yeah, it
growing
doesn't.
up evangelical, it's like I had to, I have to create prayers. What am I going to think about? What's going to put a few prayers in the notes on your phone, write them out, or go research a few prayers and pray a paragraph prayer. At one of those times, pray the Lord's
Yeah,
Prayer at one of those times. Find a few scripture passages that are close to you and read them out loud. Use those as prayers. This idea that prayer is only effective if it is spontaneous is, well, the early church would have laughed at us for that idea. Not as though it's not acceptable to do that, but it's not the only way to pray. And I think if you're starting this kind of rhythm or this structure of prayer and it feels overwhelming, find some prayers that really resonate with you. And use those.
yeah. There's tons of prayer books out there. Um, if you just Google prayer book, you'll see Phyllis Tickle. You'll see Thomas Merton has prayer books they put together. There's churches that put prayer books together. I know the monastic community of Iona has a popular prayer book that people use. There's also apps. There's an app called Hallow app that has different prayers. And actually you can create different rhythms on there for prayer. They have kind of a daily office thing. So there's lots of resources for you. I'd encourage you to explore some of that. And
Yeah,
like
just do it.
Kevin
Just start.
said,
Just
keep it
try it. You
simple.
know, make a
Pick a
commitment to do
couple,
it for 30 days
one
or
little,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, one little paragraph prayer, and then on with your day. Just
Yeah.
make that a regular habit and rhythm.
And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know, I don't want to say that prayer doesn't work and that you shouldn't be in that routine, but I get for some people, um, prayer may not be as an effective a routine of spiritual progress as maybe other things. You know, there are lots of other things that you can do or utilize, and I think for different people, different practices are going to resonate and have different impacts. So I'm not putting down this idea of prayer, but I'm saying if prayer seems a little overwhelming or doing this seems a little much, or you get like a month into it and you're still like, this is torture, replace that time with something else that is helpful there and see how that feels.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't be
you don't want to
legalistic,
make
I guess
this
is what I'm
law.
saying. Don't be
Yeah,
legalistic
yeah,
about this
yeah.
stuff.
Uh, but give it a. I would say don't make it legalistic, but give it a good go. You know, give it a month. Give it a 6 week period,
And
just as you
I
would a
think anybody
diet
who will
or
give it
new
enough time will
exercise routine.
find that, yeah, will find that it is refreshing, will find that it is helpful, will find that it is not difficult. But I also want to give you permission, you know, that if starting with prayer seems overwhelming or you get a weekend and like, this is too much, feel the freedom to find something else to start with first whenever you start changing routines and trying to put these rhythms and structures into your life, and then come back to prayer later.
Yeah, I wanted to say I thought it was interesting being in the CrossFit world. Um, they talk a lot about recovery, right? And I'm sure in your weightlifting world, recovery is important as well. And one of the things that's becoming more popular is like these meditative apps that
Mm-hmm.
actually kind of mimic the daily office apps that I have as well. They're very similar. Um, so there's actually practical good health benefits to prayer, meditation, fill in the blank. Just pausing to breathe can be really helpful just for your own psyche, emotionally, your stress. So yeah, I think there's added benefits outside of just your spiritual life, and scientists are proving it every day, which is fascinating. Um, so the other one, so daily office, so that's something we want to look at daily to form our hearts. And then there's kind of the church calendar. Do you want to share about the church calendar, the
Yeah, for
feast, the
any of you who
fests,
have been in probably
some of the fun?
mainline denominations, you've heard of this idea of the church year, or you know the liturgical cycle. We walk through these different seasons of the church. You may have gone to a church, and if you're evangelical, you may not have a liturgical cycle or understand what it is, but you may have visited a church where, you know, one month it was decorated green, another month it was decorated in purple. Essentially, what happened is the early church began celebrating different seasons as time went forward. And so, you know, for some of us, we still celebrate Advent, we still celebrate Christmas. Many of us will have heard of Lent, even if we haven't celebrated Lent. But these are only a few of the time periods on the calendar that the early church developed in order to kind of force people into a different rhythm of time. They wanted to be countercultural, and one of the ways in which the early church really felt as though they could help redeem and baptize people into their Christian faith is by creating a different cycle and rhythm of time to put people into, essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, to kind of walk through this journey of Jesus, this journey of redemption. And so over the course of 100 years, several hundred years, each of these kind of seasons began to be put on the calendar. Some of the ones that we practice the most are some of the later ones that were put on there, like Advent and Christmas, and some of those were some of the last ones to be put on there because the early church didn't necessarily see the importance of the birth story of Jesus in comparison to the importance of the death, the burial, the resurrection, his baptism, and some of these other things. So it's kind of fascinating that we have kind of prioritized Christmas and Advent where the early church would have really, really prioritized Lent, which is one of the ones that we sometimes are the least excited about. And I don't know whether there's good or bad there, but it's just kind of fascinating to see that. But they intentionally did that to work against calendars and to baptize people into a rhythm or a structure that walked through the Jesus story. And I think that's powerful. And so, eventually there are colors that become associated with these things. And, celebrations that was tied oftentimes to feast and fasting. Lent was a fast. There were other seasons on the calendar that were a fast, but a lot of these were feasts. And some people still call it, a feast day. Easter is a high feast day, et cetera, et cetera. But they really feasted on these days. Like, it wasn't just a word. It was something that they actually did. And so, they were continually, I think, doing things to give people opportunities to be forced into a different rhythm or a different calendar. And it was wildly effective. Some of the greatest growth, or maybe the greatest growth in the history of the church, was when there wasn't a Bible, but they were utilizing these structures and rhythms and practices in order to teach people what it meant to be a follower of the way of Jesus.
Yeah. And so our culture, go back to the culture, has a calendar, right? It's forming our hearts
Mother's Day.
as Americans to be American.
Mother's Day and Father's Day,
yeah.
Right? 4th of July,
right?
You have the patriotic holidays. And
we have all, Super Bowl.
Yeah, Super Bowl's great.
I think the reason why Christmas, it kind of gets blended a bit and more important is I think it's a cultural phenomenon as well. It's not just a church thing. I think it's a very cultural, it's blended. It's hard to tell because actually the true form of Advent is like, you don't sing about Jesus being born until he's actually born, but we spend the whole month of December singing about Jesus being born. And so like a true Advent is a true Advent's waiting for Jesus to be born.
Yeah, it's
right?
Actually, it's a little depressing. It's a little like Lent. The true Advent, those 4 weeks before Christmas is a little like Lent.
Yeah.
Like you're supposed to dive deeply into this longing. Come thou long expected Jesus. You're singing these minor key songs, that are about expectation and anticipation. Joy to the world. You don't sing till Christmas Day at all, ever. Nothing about the birth until the 25th actually arrives. But, it's fascinating. We're talking about that. It's fascinating.
12 days of Christmas.
12 days of Christmas. The church today really follows the celebration calendar of the world, of culture. Super Bowl Sunday, July 4th, Mother's Day, Father's Day. The church orients itself around the culture that it is in now and tries to force all of these, tries to make them spiritual celebrations. Let's celebrate our nation, that God has given to us. Let's celebrate mothers and talk about mothering in the Bible. I'm not saying any of those things are necessarily, Super Bowl's a tough one, right? What do you do with the Super Bowl? I'm not saying any of these things are bad, but the church
talk about Taylor Swift.
The church has kind of lost its rhythm of spiritual celebrations and kind of co-opted culture in a way that just feels ultimately a little weird, especially, with nationalism, seeing what happened in World War, II era Germany. It can become a little dicey whenever we just start as a church piling on to the cultural structures and the cultural rhythms and baptizing them into spiritual waters. But also, just kind of avoiding all of those things and pretending like Mother's Day doesn't exist, like Super Bowl isn't happening, like July 4th isn't on. Like, also feels a little bit weird too, because, in the world, not of the world, but not out of the world. So I do think that there is probably some sort of a middle road between just wholesale baptism of the structures and rhythms of national holidays and cultural holidays, and also church holidays as well. And I think, we're in a season where churches, where individuals, where pastors have to kind of figure out for their own community, for their own, congregation, what makes the most sense. If you're in the South, football, SEC football is huge. If you're in Michigan or Ohio, it's huge, right? If you're in Indiana, you just kind of try to avoid football as a celebration. holiday. So things I think have to be
They
contextual.
suck at basketball still too.
But I think too, also there are rhythms that are specific to the people. When I was in a Quaker church, on Memorial Day, we would talk about a Quaker or just a Christian who was a martyr. And so, I think that there are ways to still, celebrate some of these cultural holidays, but also do so in ways that are creative, and contextual to the denomination or to the faith stream that you're in. And I think that that's perfectly appropriate. The worst thing I think you could do is just avoid it and just become another accessory to the cultural rhythms around you without ever really thinking about what it is that you're teaching and saying and not teaching and saying. Um, but I also don't want you, to kind of ignore what's going on in the
Yeah,
culture around you. And I do think that the church calendar, the church year, the liturgical schedule, really should probably, for many of us, be the starting point for what we do and where we go, and then branch out from there and make it your own. It's worked for centuries, for millennia, for the church. And there's something beautiful. I know that not everybody wants to be on the same text every week, but there is also something beautiful about knowing that all the churches worldwide are focusing on the same text every Sunday, are together, are united. And in a season and in a time, especially in an election year, where there's a lot of disunity felt among Christians and a lot of fracturing, finding ways to create unity, with the body of Christ, is extremely powerful. And these are easy wins and easy ways to do it.
yeah. I like that.
I said a lot there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
don't ignore what's going on around.
You hit my play
No,
button.
I I just want to highlight one thing is like just I think it's important that we be intentional on the calendar and not just let the cultural calendar suck us in. So obviously we want to be aware of what's going on around us. A good church does that and it has always done that. But I think to also be aware of the actual church calendar that's laid out before us. And as you hinted at, like the lectionary is part of that church calendar. And so if you didn't know, if you don't know where to read, there's a daily, not only daily prayers, but there's a daily readings that go through the whole Bible over a 3-year period. And each Sunday, what I preach from is when you hear somebody say they preach from the lectionary, they choose a text or two from the lectionary readings for that day on Sunday and preach those. And so, as Kevin was saying, throughout the world, churches that follow the lectionary are preaching the same thing. And I actually get on a call every Tuesday with some pastor friends of mine. We preach through the lectionary together and we talk about it. And so there's kind of a lot of unity around that. Um, and, and it's powerful and it helps mold our hearts. And we don't, at least I'm talking like as a pastor, I like it too, because I don't get stuck in the same 4 books that I really like to preach
It forces
from
you, yeah,
that.
to deal with things that you would not
It
otherwise deal
forces
with.
us. Yeah. So, it's helpful and it's a tool that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know existed for a long time, even when I was pastoring. I wasn't aware of that. There's a broader church calendar that's been around for thousands of years. And there is, and its whole goal is to point us to Jesus, point our hearts to Jesus. And so I think it's important that you become aware of that, because the calendar, I think a big reason why the church has lost so many people, is we've just gotten sucked into the calendar of the world. And so the church's calendar, what's important to the church, no longer matters. The sports calendar, the fun activities calendar, what's going on in the world around us, that matters more. I think there'll come a day where churches will cancel Sunday morning. I'm sure it's already happened. They'll cancel worship for the Super Bowl, which I don't know how I feel about that, but um, I'm sure it's already happened, right? So we're
Yeah.
letting what's going on around us dictate what we do. And so I think it should be the opposite. We participate in what's going on around us, but we don't let it dictate to us what we do. My 2 cents on that
Yeah, no, again, I think it's just
calendar.
about creating
Um,
it's about creating appropriate rhythms and structures that drive us more deeply into our faith and strengthen it rather than just buying into the rhythms and the structures of the world around us. And I think, a lot of times say you're just following the world or you're just following culture or those things. And yeah, okay, whatever. But I think it's more about recognizing, like you said, whenever you spent time saying, "Oh, well, I am on this shopping site. Let me work back from here and figure out kind of what got me to this place that from here." And you realize that like there was a whole rhythm, there was a whole structure, there was a whole path that you took in order to get there, and you became aware of that. If you weren't aware of that, you wouldn't have known that it was there to try to sell you something, good or bad. And I think that that's kind of it, is us kind of waking up to the fact that there are rhythms and structures around us every single day that we buy into, that we follow, that we believe in, that we utilize, that we aren't even aware that we do. And we should be aware of those in order to ensure that they are the rhythms and the structures that we want to be giving ourselves to and spending our time following. And if so, great, fine. But if not, being aware of it helps us to say, well, okay, now I can control this in order to utilize maybe other rhythms or other structures that are going to put me in a better place to where I want to go or who I want to be. Knowing is half the battle.
Yeah. And so, yes, becoming aware. And so, I guess practically speaking on this one, um, get online, revised Common Lectionary by Vanderbilt is a good place to start. There's a lot of resources there. Every day you can just pop it up. Um, there's there's cool tools out there. Brian Zond does some good work. If you just Google his name, Zahnd, he has some practical tools on his church website. He's a pastor that just kind of like give you like a very good visual of what a church calendar is and the rhythms of that. Um, and so enter into it. Maybe your church already does, and maybe it'll help you become aware of how your church enters into it or doesn't. Um, but yeah, I would I would look at that and start to practice some certain things. So feast, you mentioned it, but I think that's part of this is like not missing the feast and being intentional. You could just do this with your immediate family. There's You get on these liturgical calendars, they'll tell you feast day for certain saints, feast day for the Trinity is in November, every November. There's certain feast days that I practice in my family, like the Trinity is one of them, where I'll be specific. Hey, this meal, we'll do a special meal. We'll talk about the Trinity. Some of my favorite saints we'll do that for as well. So those are ways in which as well you could participate in this to remember. And like you mentioned earlier, Kevin, about denominational heroes. Maybe there's heroes in your denomination that you could highlight. There's probably your denomination probably has feast days. They probably maybe don't call them that, but for different saints of your denomination that you could participate in and make a rhythm as well. That'll be important.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
mean, I
feast
think
days.
giving the
And
giving the faith handles, people need examples. Paul said, "Follow me as I follow Christ." And so I think that, whether or not you believe, affirm, or follow saints as, maybe defined by Catholic Church or by Orthodoxy or some of these other areas, doesn't matter as much as the fact that we do need examples of people who have run the race well, because it's helpful for us to see ourselves, I think, and what we can be and how we can live. And it's especially helpful for adolescents and for kids to have examples other than mom, other than dad, other than the pastor, the people in their church around them who are going to let them down, people who have finished the race and run it well. Uh, the Bible talks a lot positively about saints, and we don't have time to go into that here, but I love what you do about creating feast days and eating. There's something about eating that's powerful. Heck, there's several saints in our family. My grandfather, is one of them. And oftentimes we will, on like his birthday, he's been gone for a long time, but we'll eat his favorite food and we'll talk about him. I'll tell stories about my grandfather, about his faith, and the ability for them to know that there are people who they are genetically connected to, who were amazing individuals for my kids is a powerful lesson. Even if I don't have to say, you could be this or you could grow up to this, I know that they're feeling that, like, this could be them, this could be me.
Mm.
And so I
Yeah.
love the idea of doing that around food or doing it around dinner, not as though it's wrong to sit down, in a family worship service in the living room, with pews and get on the piano and sing a hymn or two, but doing it around food, doing it around a feast, doing it around a meal, you know, especially if it's that person's favorite food, just they won't forget it. It embeds it inside of them, which is really what we
Yeah.
want to do with our faith, with the good parts of our faith. Each and every day is embed the good things inside of us so that they are buried deeply within us, so that when the storms come in our kids' lives or in our lives, we've got some bedrock, some foundation.
It's good. Yeah. So calendar, the feast days. Who doesn't like to feast?
What do you eat on Trinity Day?
And even if you're a church leader, he, he, I don't remember.
Things in
Probably
threes.
steak. I typically
steak.
steak.
Because it just absolutely steak on Trinity. That makes complete sense. The full meat of the gospel is contained in the idea of the Trinity.
But even yeah. Egg was like the closest thing you could get, right? You got the shell, the yolk, and then the whites. But no, I'd encourage any pastor. I know some church leaders listen to us rant and go on, but to figure out how you might move into the church calendar even more with your own congregations, I think would be good. And feast days are good places to start, because what Christian doesn't like to have a good potluck, and you could point them to some saint or person of influence in your world. So I think it's a good place to start. Calendar, is a good place even for individuals, not just churches, to look at and to create rhythms in your family. I know a lot of young parents are always asking me, like, what can I do for my kids and things like that. And this might be one of the ways, is to enter into the church calendar with them. So yeah. And then obviously we talked about the daily office. So those two rhythms are a good way to structure your life. A good diet and exercise, if you will, for spirituality, more than just eat healthier and exercise. Hopefully there's some practical, steps below that, just reading your Bible and praying, that we tend to always say or hear. So yeah, if you had any closing thoughts on that, we can move to some news items.
No, yeah, I think that's perfectly stated. Especially if you have a congregation or you have kids or adolescents around. I think creating rhythms and structures that are fun, that are enjoyable, but also that are educational. Food wins at home, and food wins in church as well. And so rethink the rhythms and the structures that you're doing at home, rethink the rhythms and the structures that you're doing at church, and find a new way. I mean, think outside the box. I was in a church one time where I decided, this feasting was a really fun idea, a cool idea. And so we would regularly move out of the pews in the auditorium and into the fellowship hall on Sunday morning, and actually have our church service around tables once every few months with food. And, those were some of the favorite services that people were a part of, because they were out of the ordinary. It kind of threw off the normality of things. People got to fellowship with each other. Communion was wildly different in that kind of space that it was in a traditional worship space. That the message was more interactive just because of the space. And so I think, thinking outside the box of ways to teach and to educate differently outside of your normal structures and rhythms will be wildly effective. And you can find things that are unique to your own context and that will be accepted by your people.
Or you could try something and get yelled at. But
I found no matter what you do in church, you get yelled at. Even if you don't do anything, you get yelled at. Same at home. complaint department. That is my role, my job as a father, as a parent.
Yeah,
Is complaint department. No matter what I do, even if I do nothing, I'm still receiving the complaints. So
yeah,
I might as well accomplish something
very
by
true.
doing it. Just throw them off the game, keep them guessing. Sometimes the best rhythm is no
Yeah,
rhythm.
it's a good place to end.
All right, news of the
You
week.
can get yelled at for that. Uh, news. Well, uh, well, there's lots I could go to. We had
Oh my
Johnny Mac
gosh,
saying mental
yes,
health isn't a thing.
yes, yeah.
Uh,
John MacArthur.
John
I used to love John MacArthur.
MacArthur.
There are a few people who have been so high and then so low in my spiritual journey. You know, the chasm between, you know, the mental health.
Yeah,
What is it in the church that thinks it's a win to deny mental health? You know, I mean, denying the denying the need for therapy and counseling is one thing. Denying, you know, saying that the Bible can help all of these things, you don't need to go outside of the Bible for mental health issues is another thing. But saying that these things don't exist, like that PTSD doesn't exist, like that's next level crazy, John. Like it's certifiably insane. I just, who are you? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? There's no path here that doesn't hurt people and make you look like a fool.
yeah. It's one of those things that, I mean, John MacArthur doesn't care. But even if you don't think it's a real thing, it's not something you would ever should ever publicly say. But he's John MacArthur, so he doesn't care about that. But it makes him look like he just doesn't understand or deny science. Maybe he's a science denier because it's as proven fact these things exist as like heart issues, like your arteries clogged. We can see that your arteries clogged. You should take this blood thinner or whatever to help your artery. The same with mental health. They can actually scientifically see what's going on and give you something to help. Um, and if you stop doing the thing they give you to help, you could harm yourself or others because of the mental health issue. I mean, it's a scientifically proven thing.
It
So,
is.
like when he says that, I just think he denies science. This is what it feels like. Which that area of Christianity, it seems they do kind of deny science in many other ways.
Yeah, you
So
know,
it's not far from their
no, it's not. You know,
brand.
for all of this talk about, you know, buying into culture and the slippery slope and all these things that you know, I used to say and believe as a conservative fundamentalist, you see happen in real time when it comes to denial of science. You know, you have to buy in wholesale, or they do end up kind of buying in wholesale to all of this science denial. You know, it starts with creationism, you know, 6 day evolution. It starts with, you know, the Bible is a science book. And then it goes, I mean, even just in recent memory, we don't have to go very far back, you know, to talk about COVID. COVID doesn't exist. COVID was created by the government. You know, it's this domino effect where you end up with PTSD. Mental health does not exist because once you kind of undermine the bedrock of any science, you end up undermining the bedrock of all science, and he becomes crazy. Like there's just no, it's there's no explanation. There's no excuse. It's insanity.
Yeah, he likes to do and say insane things. Um, I mean, there's a video that went viral of him saying that slavery would be good for people. So, uh, crazy, crazy person. And the antithesis of John MacArthur, this past week, we kind of remembered Rachel Held Evans. Um, her passing 5 years ago.
There's a saint to
Um,
remember.
she was someone for me that was, yeah, she was someone I remembered online, and talked about her with my kids. We didn't do a feast. Maybe I should do that next year. But she actually is the one who got me really thinking about the gospel and Jesus in new ways. Kind of the first kind of foray. Her and Leonard Sweet, who we studied under, got me thinking about Jesus in new ways. And like she has this quote that I posted on my social media just about like the gospel is open for all, like all those who are hungry and want more. And there's not boundaries. And so that you have John MacArthur, excuse me, on one side who's like all these boundaries set up, you know. Then you have Rachel Held Evans. That was fascinating to me. In one week, these two people were kind of in the news, if you will, in Christendom, and their values are complete opposites. And obviously, I would want to celebrate Rachel over John, but yeah, I just thought she was a beautiful voice for the church. She's missed, but I think in some ways, like more of us have stepped up to fill the void as best we can. I mean, I saw you ranting and raving this week on the Twitterverse, kind of in her spirit. I felt
Wasn't it
about
her spirit? I don't know
welcoming
what's.
people into the kingdom of God. No, I heard a podcast, so I was listening to her this week, and one of her last podcasts she gave on Pete Enz's podcast, and she was talking about all the haters, and I was thinking about you. I was like, she was like, nothing's changed in like 6-7 years. Um, that she's going to hell. She's apostate. She's talking about all that and how angry she gets, even though she doesn't know these people, and it shouldn't affect her the way And I know you and I've had these conversations, and it's like, and then watch you kind of defend the LGBTQI community and get so much backlash for it.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
definitely in her spirit.
I was going to show
I
you
was feeling that.
if I could pull
That
it up here. Yeah, it's been quite a week on Twitter, right? I mean, it always is, and the hate is just always always there. It's just I don't know where it is. It's maddening. It's sad. It's yeah. I don't know if it's worse or not than when she was here, but it's my wife this morning actually wrote me. I don't know if you could see that or not. If it'll go into focus, but my wife wrote me this note that essentially said, "You have got to get off of Twitter. Like it's abuse. Like it's an abusive cycle that you're in. You go there because you think that you need." The leverage or the influence that you need to keep a platform, and it's abuse, and you're abusing yourself. It's just like go out, touch grass, listen to the birds, think about using the time think about using the time in other way. Like it was like it amounts like 8-point font, single spaced, like notes written in the margins just saying wake up to the effect that this is having on your soul. And so yeah, what you said about Rachel um resonates. The interesting thing about Rachel, um I feel like she was a leading voice in a time where a lot of the things that she was saying and thinking were not yet kind of marketable. I mean, obviously she had books, she made money off of it. But she was able to just kind of express theology and be transparent about her journey without, I think, needing to be a celebrity or an influencer for doing it. At least you never get that impression from Rachel. It always came off feeling a lot more authentic. And now, unfortunately, I think there is a vacuum, and there shouldn't be really. Not that Rachel Held Evans can be replaced, but it's sad that I think there is a real vacuum in her style and in her authenticity and in her ability to resonate with a large group of people. There's I can't think of any. I'm sure they're out there. You probably can, but there are very few people out there now who I think are able to do that in the way that Rachel Held Evans did. It's just become a lot more. influencing capitalism and trying to get ahead and
Well,
one up
yeah.
each other. And that's unfortunate, because a lot of folks out there really need a voice of authenticity and of truth and of patience and of strength that Rachel had, in ways that just there's nobody out there that I can think of. And if so, if you can, let us know, because I want to have these people on my radar. But there just
No,
seems to be a huge void.
she was a unique. Yeah, she was a unique voice. So gifted, a writer, the wit, quick wit, thinks on the spot, and obviously she thought deeply about God and the ways of God, and then was able to share that in a real way that, like you say, an authentic way that people understood. Like one of her books, I think, Searching for Sunday, where she tried to live every thing about the Bible out or something like that. Um, and talked about the failures and the successes along the way. It was just like so authentic, right? Like she was just so real. And even that podcast I listened to, I'll have to find it and send it to you.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd love to hear it.
like it was just raw and real. Like this sucks. This sucks about it, and um, and so I think a lot of folks don't have the authenticity. They have they try to put the facade up, um, like look at me kind of facade, and not that I want to put them down for that, because I think that's the culture in which you live, and so that's hard to resist, that look at me kind of thing. That is our culture. So you know, but yeah, I think you hit it. Authentic voice. We need that. I'd have to give it some thought, but I don't. Pete Ends might be one. I mean, they're out there. Some people that I feel like are people that they're who they are
Yeah, Pete Enns
consistently.
is a great
Um,
voice. I think
so
too, as you were talking, one of the things that really made Rachel unique was that she was a female voice, and unfortunately, even in progressive spaces, it still continues
yeah,
in many ways to be an old boys club. You know, you and me, right? But
yeah. Her friend Sarah Bessie uh, is another one that's pretty good, but just she's kind of taken a back seat, I feel like, lately. But yeah, is she? I mean, no one's gonna replace the power of Rachel Hall Evans's voice. It was yeah, a unique one. It's hard to fill, especially as a woman in our culture, as you said. But yeah, I mean, she stood up to Driscoll, man. Back when Driscoll was like, you know, he still was loved by everybody. So
you know, she had she had
yeah,
grit, that Rachel did,
yeah.
and she was right. I guess she was right. She was proven right.
All right, she was right. Yeah, she wasn't wrong often. And when she was, she admitted it and owned it. All right, that's all I had for today. I was
All
gonna
right.
maybe bring up Josh Howerton if you wanted, but
Uh, you know, I mean, Josh Howerton, who's in Rockwall, Texas, outside of Dallas. I'm very familiar actually with the church that he is in, was very familiar with the pastor before him at that church. Just can't keep himself out of the news for plagiarism, right? I mean, it happened again this week, I think. There's this thing where he,
I know.
was inviting people on a Wednesday night to come record a sermon because it was a sermon that he
Yeah,
felt so he didn't want to hand it off to somebody else. It was that important of a sermon, so he pre-recorded. So he was in the news just for doing that, because once you're in the news, once people are tracking you, like they track everything that you do. Well, this sermon comes up, and it was this weekend that it was aired in his church, and there's more plagiarism in it. Like people found the sources of the stuff that he was utilizing in order to preach. I'm like, dude, you're just how stupid, how
and this
lightly
one,
educated do you have to be to
yeah,
know that people are listening and dissecting every single word that you say and every single thing that you type in order to find something, and you just keep handing it to them week after week after week on a silver platter? I
yeah,
don't even know what to do with that. I mean, you work at a big church, hire somebody in communications in order to help you, hire somebody in crisis communications in order to manage this PR nightmare of a shit show that you have
Yeah.
created. It's so taking. Calm down. Blood pressure. Gotta go down. Gonna have to take another
I
blood
think
pressure pill after this. But it's like you are. I mean, talk about taking the
I
focus
think he
off of the
intentionally
gospel.
did not quote him.
You think?
No, sorry. I think he intentionally didn't quote him because of who it is. Stephen Wolfe, the Christian
Stephen Wolf.
nationalist guy.
Yeah, the Christian nationalist. You know, the white.
I think he was
Else
trying
go
to.
to your. Everybody else go to your homeland guy.
Yeah.
You know, the case for Christian nationalism, which is really just the case
Yeah,
for
yeah.
deportation of everybody who isn't white Anglo-European.
Yeah, that guy. I think he thought he could sneak one in and use his stuff. Or maybe he's just that dumb. I don't know.
You know, it's
I don't know.
it's not.
It probably would have been better if he just quoted him.
He is probably both so insulated from reality and very insulated in his job. But I'll tell you, at some point, even people who are extremely insulated in their jobs, at some point, the churches, the boards, the congregations they just get tired of the drama. No matter how much they love you, they just get tired of it every single week. And his church is just going to get tired of it at some point if he doesn't stop it. No matter how much they love him.
Yep.
He's no John MacArthur.
It's a great show.
He's not going to be able to stay at that church with a stranglehold. You know, it takes a certain kind of devious person in order to maintain control. Like it takes somebody who's able to rule with an iron fist, but also kind of be seen as a legend. You know, as a nice guy, but behind the scenes is just ruthless. It takes a certain amount of ruthlessness to be able to be a John MacArthur, to be an ass, to be a Mark Driscoll. Even Mark Driscoll, you know, had that, but still, you know, it ended up crumbling around him. Josh Howerton may be ruthless and have control issues behind the scenes, but he's also he's not that. He's the court jester. He's the Joker. Josh, you don't have that, so you're gonna have to pull it together at some point if you want to keep your job. That's my personal opinion. That's my call. That's my consulting assessment of this situation. If I were advising Josh, pull it together, buddy.
Yeah.
This throne is not yours to keep in this church.
Stop.
Yeah, you're not the founding pastor.
Yeah.
Okay, you done?
Agreed. All right. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I kind of want to keep going about Josh, but you know, it may be better to move on to. I'm sure next week he'll have done something else, so we can pick back up where.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The news every week. There's always content on him. Yeah, he's funny.
So
yeah.
So how's it going? Give us an update on it. Give us an update. You know, first on how things are going. I know you're tracking the macros, you're doing the workouts. You know, how's the progress?
Good. I'm down 21 pounds.
Dude, it was like 12 as of last week or 15. That's crazy. There. Wow.
Yeah, I had a good week this week.
Dang.
It dropped pretty good this week. So
I'm jealous.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know, the early days are easier than the last, 20 pounds. So yeah, I don't know. Getting ready for Murph. We have Murph coming up at the end of the month at the CrossFit gym. So working on the running, the pull ups, the push ups, the air squats. Actually, I'm finding that the air squats are the worst. So get ready for that.
Yeah, you love Murph. It's a classic, right? In CrossFit, even people who aren't a part of CrossFit still come in and participate in Murph.
Yeah, Murph is. It's become so popular. People don't realize that CrossFit was the originator of the Murph workout, and then it got taken over. But it's fine. I think I just found out this year that CrossFit and the Murph organization are partnering together officially. So
Wow.
it's coming home. But yeah, if you didn't know, every CrossFit box across America does the workout Murph, which is a 1 mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats. You can partition all those how you want them to do them, and then you go run another mile at the end. Or what I do is I walk the last mile or waddle. But
Crawl on all fours.
yeah,
Whatever it takes to get there.
crawl. Yeah,
just to get it done.
just
Don't need
survive.
an RX just to get it done.
That's actually the one workout that your time, no one really, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So no one walks around and be like, "What's your Murph time?" There's other workouts where they're like, "What's your time on this workout?" But not on Murph. So
All the girl workouts, right? All the girl name workouts.
Yeah, the girls. So, how are you, man?
Yeah, things are going well.
How's your lifting?
Yeah, lifting's going well. Maintaining, going up on lifts in some things. It's fun, to be in the gym and be lifting, and every once in a while catch somebody looking over at you lifting. Like that's always that's always a good feeling, whenever you see that. Weight wise, measurement wise, went up a little bit this week, and I ate crow with my coach. I didn't change anything. I ate exactly what you said to do, but went up a little bit. And he was like, well, I can still see progress. I can still see you're growing. Muscles looking fuller, looking larger, and, pointed out some specific things and said, weight's only the number on the scale is only one indicator, of progress. And I'm just like, and we've said this before, but I want that weight on the scale to move in the right direction at all times. So it's like dig in the heels and just keep doing it. But I know if I have like 2 or 3 weeks, in a row that are like that, like he's going to take food away. And so, I like my food. So come on, wait, come on, keep going in the right direction. Diet Coke, yeah, there it is. Coke. Yeah, cherry Coke, 0 right there. I'm avoiding this, which puts me in the bathroom, all through the night.
Getting old, man.
At a certain age, you have to get up and go in the night. But you drink that much water, I'm telling you, so every hour on the hour, you're like, here we go again. I tell you though, never pee clear. Funny. Never pee clear that when you have a whole gallon of water a day to drink. Stuff looks like Avion. And that may be a good time to stop.
Just fill your jug back up with it.